Hi, history teachers. It's Albonetti here to talk to you about the PSAT and the SAT. I want to walk you through a history-focused passage that will give you a sense for how you can prep students for both of these tests, both the PSAT and the SAT. This passage is actually a paired passage. It shows words by Abraham Lincoln in passage 1 and then Thoreau in passage 2 about the idea of civil disobedience. Whenever I teach students to answer these questions, I actually don't, I tell them not to start with the passage itself. I have them start with the questions. And so I want to show you the method I use with students so that, if you so desire, you can incorporate it into your classroom. Um, so the first thing I do is I tell students to read the first three questions first, just to get a sense of like what they're going to answer, like what kind of questions they're going to answer. 33, Lincoln contends that breaking the law is which consequence? And then 34 is one of those questions where they have to support the previous answer. 35 is a vocabulary question, so they need to answer, like define urge. That shows up in line 24. So the first step, I tell them to read the first three questions. The second step pertains to questions like 35. I tell students to go to the passage, look for vocabulary questions, and then go to the passage and circle those words so that they know that they're going to define the words. So line 24, urge. I would just tell them to circle the word urge. When they encounter it in the passage, they know they need to define it. Now they need to look for any other vocabulary questions. 37, observed in line 32, so I would tell them to go to line 32, circle the word observed. Look for any other vocabulary questions. Seeing no others, so I move on to step 3. So step 1, read the first 3 questions. Step 2, circle vocabulary. Step 3, I tell students to read the introduction. Not all standardized tests have these introductions, but the SAT and the PSAT do. It's this portion here, and it provides useful information that students need to read. So students could receive a history passage, a science passage, a literature passage, a social studies passage. They're going to receive one of each for a total of 5 passages. So the introduction tells them what kind of passage they're going to get. So as soon as they see Abraham Lincoln, they see the word government, they know they're going to read a history passage. Also, they're able to see the years. So 1838 and 1849 tells them that they're going to read old words. Of the 5 passages that students get in the section 1, one of the passages will be from older texts, and the older text passage is usually the hardest passage, so students can get their brains ready for some older ways of writing. So step 1, read the first 3 questions. Step 2, circle vocab. Step 3, read the introduction. Step 4, read the first 10 lines. I stole this idea from Mr. Sealand. First 10 lines, and they do this because if they get to line 10, I guess that's line 12 technically, but if they get to line 10 and they're confused by the passage, they need to start over and begin again. If, however, they get to line 10 and they're not confused, they should keep going. I give them this advice because they don't want to get to line 52, still be confused, and have to start all over again. That's a waste. So they need to start over after line 10 and try not to start over later than that. All right, the next step would be for the students to read the passage. I'm not going to read this aloud to you because I want to keep this video quick, but I am going to just make it easy for you to see it, and then you can pause the video and read each of the passages, and then when I go through the questions will make sense. So you can pause the video now to read the first column of passage 1, and then passage 2, or I'm sorry, column 2, passage 1 up at the top right. And then you can pause the video to read passage 2, and then the last part of passage 2 on the top left. So assuming that you've read the passage, let me go on to the questions to give you an idea of like the level of rigor, like how difficult the questions will be. These are SAT questions, but they're very similar to PSAT questions. They're just a tiny bit harder than the PSAT questions. So in passage 1, Lincoln contends that breaking the law has which consequence? And it would seem like C would be a good answer because that just kind of makes sense as far as the topic that they discuss. But B turns out to be the correct answer. And we know this because of 34, excuse me. So I tell students that if they get this, the question type, that's 34, it could be a problem because if they miss one of the paired questions, they could miss both. But it's a benefit because they know that the answer for 33 has to appear in one of these 4 sets of lines. So they could just flip back and forth. They need to like look at each of the lines and figure out which one is correct, which line supports question 33. So if we look at A, lines 9 through 12, we can see that it says, "Let every man remember that to violate the law is to trample on the blood of his father and to tear the liberty of his own and his children's liberty." So answer A turns out to be correct. I'm just going to move fast for the sake of time, but it supports answer choice B in 33. So 35 is used in line 24. Urge most nearly means. To answer this question, I have students go to the passage and plug in the words to see which word fits. It's harder to do on this iPad, but it's very easy to do on the book. They just flip back and forth. So urge, when I so pressingly urge a strict observance of all the laws, so does Lincoln mean hasten when I hasten, or stimulate a strict observance of laws when I require a strict observance, or advocate a strict observance? Urge more or less means support, which more or less means advocate. So advocate turns out to be correct. If the students plug in these 4 words, they can typically figure out which word best supports or best redefines the original word in question. So in question 36 says, the sentences in lines 24 to 28 primarily serve which function in passage 1? So students need to make the effort of going back to lines 24 to 28 to answer this question. If they don't make the effort, they're going to get it wrong. So 24, when I so pressingly urge a strict observance of all the laws, let me not be understood as saying there are no bad laws, nor that grievances may not arise, for the redress of which no legal provisions have been made. So in this portion, in this sentence, Lincoln is not refuting, he's not conceding, he's anticipating a potential counter argument. And in 37, as using line 32, observe most nearly means, again, just I have students plug in these 4 options into the sentence to see which word makes sense. So the sentence says they should be religiously observed. The laws should be religiously observed. Does that mean scrutinized, followed, contemplated, noticed? It means followed. Lincoln's encouraging people to follow laws, not to break unjust laws. In passage 2, Thoreau indicates that some unjust aspects of government are, students can cross out. He doesn't talk about superficial. Subtle and must be studied carefully, maybe, but not quite. Self-correcting, yes, but he doesn't say much about them being beneficial. Instead, the answer is D, and we can see this if we go to lines 58 to 59, where Thoreau says, if the injustice is part of the necessary friction of the machine of government, let it go, let it go. Perchance it will wear smooth. So some laws you just got to endure, and C supports that answer. And 40, the primary purpose of each passage is to, and it would seem like A is possibly correct. I've had students choose that before. B and D aren't quite relevant. Turns out to be C, because both passages are about whether we should obey unjust laws. And 41, based on the passage, Lincoln would most likely describe the behavior that Thoreau recommends in lines 64 to 66 as, again, this is a question that students have to go back to check their answer, to reread the sentence, or they're just going to get the question wrong. So there's this question tests students' effort as much as it tests their reading comprehension skills. So line 66, 64 to 66. But if it, the unjust law, is of such a nature that it requires you to break the agent of injustice to another, then I say break the law. Lincoln argues the opposite in his passage. So Lincoln would say breaking Laws would be a rejection of the country's proper forms of remedy. And then the last question, yes, the last question. Based on the passages, one commonality in the stances Lincoln and Thoreau take toward abolitionism is that these questions are often difficult because the paired passages are usually at odds. So students have to figure out what basic fundamental belief would both authors agree on. This question, the answers take a different, take a different tack. Instead of figuring out a baseline assumption that both Lincoln and Thoreau believe, instead it talks, that students have to notice that both Lincoln and Thoreau refer to abolitionism as if it's something else, like another group that they're talking about. Both men were abolitionists, but both of them speak about abolitionism as if they're not a part of a movement. So we see this for Thoreau in lines 79 to 80, when he says, "I do not hesitate to say that those who call themselves abolitionists should at once effectually withdraw their support," et cetera, et cetera. So he doesn't say I as an abolitionist, he just talks about abolitionists in general. And so the correct answer here is D. Had to confirm that it was D. Neither author embraces the cause as his own. Even though they both did in their private lives, in the passages, they don't say that they're abolitionists. So hopefully this video helps you see what types of, understand what types of questions students receive on the SAT, what level of difficulty the questions are, and hopefully how you as a history teacher can give students challenging texts and ask them challenging questions about those texts to prepare them for their PSATs, their SATs, etc. Thank you for bearing with me. Sorry for the long video. I hope you'll have a wonderful day.